So there was your pocket operation. Now we want to go ahead and program these slots in here, right? So
Yes.
you have these slots, and you probably want to just use a cutter that can fit into the slot, right? So if I take a look at the width of the slot, this is probably 1.95 millimeter. So what size tool would you like to use for programming these slots?
Good question. It is a little bit of an odd size slot. So yeah, I'm not sure what we would normally have for that. We would probably use, I'm trying to think if we'd use an 1/8 inch cutter in there. We probably would.
Okay, so if they are
Or let's see,
1.95, it would be
we'd have to
smaller than
pull
an
up.
1/8 inch, right?
Yeah, so we
So
need
let me
to,
do the math here, 1.95. So that would be 0.62, a 16th.
yeah, yeah.
Um, so you'd want to use a 16th inch cutter. Now we actually have a method called slot machining, and we can use that for it. So we can go into 2-axis and slotting or slot machining operation. Now for the features to cut, I'm going to go select curve edge regions, and I'm going to pick the feature that's at the bottom edge, so you get a full closed loop in here, because the top edge wouldn't have a closed loop around it, right?
Okay.
So you could create a sketch in Alibre for each of those, or you can go and select each of them individually if you need to. I'll just do a
Okay.
couple of them in here just to give you an idea how it works, but you can apply the same process. Now, one of the benefits we have in our Pro configuration is we just basically can pick one and then array the toolpath like you have a pattern in here.
Oh, okay.
You can
Okay.
do that in
Great.
the Pro. We have the ability to do that. So we have this selected in here for the tool. I'm going to go ahead and add a new tool. It's going to be a 16th. So that would be 1.5875. Half of 3.175 divided by 2, right?
Yep.
And I can specify the flute length, shoulder
Okay.
length, just make it reasonable for the tool.
Sure.
And I can save this as 1/16.
So if you specify a flute, let's say a shoulder length, or excuse me, a flute length that is less than your cutting depth, does it give you an error?
It actually marks those areas as holder collisions in the simulation.
Okay, great.
Okay, now I'm going to add a cleanup pass, and then for the cut levels, the feature what I selected is at the bottom of the pocket, or bottom of the slot, and I'm going to go from the top face right here down to this bottom edge. That's 4.75 millimeter. I can break this up into 1 millimeter passes, set
Okay.
my entry and exit in here, and I can also apply these for each level and then pick generate. So in this particular step, it's actually going to create a slot machining operation. You see the toolpath shows it
Okay,
triangle
sure.
cut pattern. So you can always go back in here and make changes. If you want to tighten up the tolerance, you could do that. You have all of these controls in here. So there's your...
Can you explain the tolerance setting? I'm not quite following what
Yeah,
that
the
is.
tolerance is used when you have splines, when you're working with splines, or when you're working with geometries that do not have a constant radius, like a
Okay.
ellipse or a hyperbola, or one of those geometries where
Okay.
it's a NURBS curve, or it could be a spline where for lines and arcs we automatically fit arcs to the toolpath, and lines should be fine. If it's a polyline, that's where the
Okay.
tolerance comes into effect, and you can use a tighter value like a micron or tighter to make it even more accurate. But here it's not going to make any difference because this
Yeah.
is not a spline. This is just a series of line segments in here.
Okay.
So
What's the
now,
downside of setting that to a very high accuracy?
well, it
If you
depends
did
on
have
what your machine can handle, right? So
Okay.
if your machine is not capable of handling a tighter tolerance, then or number of decimal accuracy, then you might machine may not have enough look ahead, or so you might see some kind of a jerky motion on the machine since it's not able to
Okay.
find how many close points.
Okay.
So you can now notice that we were able to program these slots. Now I could have applied the same for all of them in a similar process. If you want to go back and edit these, you can just go back in here and edit the operation.
Okay.
And I can go back and add. So just hold down the shift key and you can go ahead and pick. So I'm basically selecting each of these.
Okay.
Then I'll go pick the ends of it as well. So in this particular case, these needs to be closed, right? So I'm basically selecting the sides, just making my selection a little bit faster.
Sure.
So I have these selected in here. I'm going to generate the toolpath. So now the toolpath has been generated for each of these slots on one side.
And you also said you could pattern that tool? Like let's say you had 100 slots and you don't want to select all
So
those.
what we could do in our Pro is, let me go back and drop this in here. I'm going to just select one of these sets in here. So what I have programmed is just for one of them right here, right? So